Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of Data Access, I would like to welcome you all to the first edition of Nextv series Australia and New Zealand. Today, we will be talking with TV industry professionals within the ANZ region to discuss the latest business trends and key challenges faced within this particular industry. Before getting into the core of the discussion, I would like to thank our speakers and sponsors, namely Limelight Network, Vindizia, Paul, EasyDRM, and Bitmoving for making this first edition possible. Without further ado, let's have a look at today's agenda. Okay, just bear with me. Here you go. So shortly after this brief introduction, I will be discussing on the TV broadcaster strategic insight, followed by our gold sponsor, Limelight, will be doing a thorough discussion on the booming era of live OTT broadcasting. And the third panel will be on the content delivery strategies for OTT broadcasters. And we will have a short break for lunch and come back on and have a look into the better content discovery in a streaming world. And finally, we will have a discussion with Vindizia, Discovery, and Foxtel on the pay TV operator OTT D2C strategy. And we will conclude the day with the new era of advertising for video entertainment. So I have the pleasure for this first panel to introduce you to Arjun from Encore, Will from West Media, and Carmen from TVNZ. And this panel will be moderated by Julian Clover. Julian, over to you.
Joanna, thank you very much indeed, and good morning, everyone. So we're going to be talking about TV broadcasters' strategic insights for the next 45 minutes or so. Let me start with Carmen Aitken of TVNZ. Carmen is the General Manager of Product and Data Strategy there. And I wondered if you could maybe start us off by telling us a little bit about your digital journey, as it were, and what your streaming offer is right now, and also how far you've come.
Sure. So TVNZ is the state broadcaster in New Zealand, and you know, like all broadcasters, it has come from that sort of traditional channel broadcast business. We've had a digital service since I think since 2007. So you know, we really started that quite a while ago, and that has been built around a catch-up service. And it's evolved materially, particularly over the last 4 to 5 years, where we've invested a lot in both a unique content proposition for on demand, launching programs and making content exclusively available. And we've invested a lot in the product itself, and the features for our audiences, and really focusing on making it easy to access, and expanding coverage across multiple endpoints, really making sure that people can get the content that they want where they want it, and focusing on helping to surface the most relevant content to our viewers, and giving them the opportunity as well to stream our live channels. And so while VOD is a really important part of that service, also having the access to that streaming experience as well is really important for a lot of our viewers. It's also helped us bring events to viewers where, and particularly, you know, people that want to watch them on their laptops or phones if they can't get to their TV, or they need to go and hide somewhere else in the house because the rest of the family doesn't want to watch it. So it's, you know, we've worked really hard to to be able to open both our local content, which is incredibly important to us, and premium international content for our viewers, and give it to them in a way that they want to experience, and the flexibility with that.
It's interesting because journalistic shorthand means we also have to have a short word to describe everything. And it sounds like a few years ago, I'd have called it a catch-up service, but clearly from what you've described now, it's evolved into something which is much more than that. There is the catch-up, but as you saying, you're developing content which, if I understand you correctly, is exclusive for the platform as well.
Sure, yeah. So we're really developing On Demand as an entertainment destination. So to be able to go and browse that content and have the flexibility to have the experience you want. And we are launching content on demand, as well as having content available exclusively on demand. And it gives us the opportunity to commission and create content that might have a better place in the streaming world than perhaps on linear. And so we've got some local comedies, Kura and Educators, that have been made exclusively for on demand.
And I guess also there's the opportunity to break out, if you like, from the regular linear schedule to, I don't know, maybe even to try out a show which here in the UK, it always used to be show premieres on BBC Three, BBC Two likes it, and then the BBC One controller thinks it's a real good ratings winner, so it ends up on BBC One. And one might imagine that same journey, but of course these days you don't know really which is the direction it's going to go in. If it goes on the main channel, if it goes on the streaming service, and which is perceived to be the top dog, as it were.
Exactly, and it really does give us much more ability to experiment, and obviously when you're there's much more quantity of content that you can put on your streaming service, so you can really look at a range. But the two programs I mentioned, Kura and Educators, if you get a chance, if you're in New Zealand, definitely worth a look, and very quirky New Zealand comedy. Educators they have a rough outline. It's not scripted. It's a comedy series, but it's a lot of it is ad lib, and they have a rough outline of a story, and then the talent that we have on it, they then just create the rest of the program for that period of time.
That sounds rather fun. Let me turn and ask you a similar question really to Will Everett, who is with Seven West Media, where he is Director of Product Solutions, or Seven Network, one of the big Australian channels. But Will, you're a Brit, I discover.
Yes, that is true, but also hold an Australian passport, of course.
Obviously so. Look, tell us about the digital journey then for Seven West Media.
Yeah, I mean, really for us, for over a decade, essentially Yahoo we had a partnership with them. So really our kind of video on demand streaming service was part of that. So it's only been within the last kind of 3 or 4 years where, we had those digital assets brought back. We spun up 7plus quite quickly to get out there in market.
I have to ask, Will, before you
Sure.
go on, I'm intrigued because I know that I remember years ago BT had a sort of content arrangement with Yahoo. It's almost as if, I know, well, what's this digital thing? We've got to give it to somebody else. Was there a point at Seven when you thought to yourselves, oh my goodness, what have we done here?
Look, I think, there was those decisions made. There was certainly pros and cons of doing that. For doing something like that, obviously what you're accessing is that kind of global tech that comes out of the US. But I think what actually transpired, you have to own your own digital kind of ecosystem. And that's more important more than ever. So I think it was for that time, and it happened in a number of countries. It kind of was okay for that period of time. but without a doubt now, you know, going into such a partnership, I don't think would be considered by any big broadcaster. And you know, for us in some ways, kind of coming out of that the other end, you know, we didn't have a lot of legacy. You know, when you've had a streaming service for, you know, 10, 15 years, there can be a lot of tech debt, and that we had a very much a you know, a clean sheet. And
I guess there is, up to a certain advantage, you know, starting is almost like the curse of the early adopter in reverse. You know, because started later, you can start with a blank sheet of paper. So tell us what you put on it.
I mean, basically what we've gone for, and, you know, very, very similar to other broadcasters, is that, you know, what's becoming very much more apparent, even when it comes to commissioning new shows and that, and your kind of, you know, the BBC analogy, I think it's now actually becoming, whether it's a new show you're commissioning, you know, I think it's important, you know, we're the same, we have 50% of our catalog that is exclusive to the streaming platform. But I think there's a new era now, and that is like, if you're commissioning for broadcast, actually, you should actually be thinking digital first. And if that kind of series or genre isn't going to pop on streaming, then you've really got to question why you're doing it in the first place. And I think that's where, you know, that's where our thinking is at the moment. It's like, when you're commissioning, you want it to be successful on streaming and on broadcast. So it's that they're not mutually exclusive anymore. They have to be, you know, they have to perform well on both platforms.
I see the Olympic Winter Games graphic behind you. One might imagine that there's the standard linear feed where you're, you know, following the, I guess, the best action, the best chance of the Australians winning the medals. But over on the digital service, you can basically offer the whole lot.
Yeah, no, you know, from a consumer choice perspective, we were able not only to provide, you know, some of the main programming from our main channels, but we had 30 channels in total for the Winter Games. And we also, you know, we've also found having dedicated replay channels, you know, that was nearly 10% of the overall viewing for the minutes that we did during the Winter Games. And, you know, the success of and the scale of the Olympics, where, you know, we had like a target of 1 billion minutes for the Summer Games, and we did 4.7 billion minutes. And I think NBC in the States, you know, did 5.9. So that just shows, I guess, the level of want and need for sports in Australia. And how well it can kind of perform. But, you know, the important part for us across that, you know, obviously CTV is a huge platform now, and making sure, you know, we had the best class experience and essentially available everywhere for the consumer.
Arjun, I'd like to bring you in now, please. Arjun is the regional director for APAC for NPOR. Maybe a bit of number crunching, if we can, and to maybe take a look at how streaming audiences, and Will gave us some highlight numbers there. How is the audience for streaming services in APAC compared to those who watch linear channels? How is it shifting?
You can see, I think Will touched on a great point there, that the CTV piece has really grown, where that, I think it was pre-pandemic as it is, but the pandemic did make it a lot more stronger as an offering for a lot of providers out there. I think some of the stats just in Australia I was reading about is that 8.6 million Aussies go and view CTV content on daily basis. That's, in comparison, that's 1/3 of the country's total population, right? So that is there. Also, I think 17.4 million Aussie adults, that's anyone 18 plus, streaming video, online spending average of 50 hours of streaming in a month. So if you stack those numbers and then compare it as the size of the countries that we are, as Australia and New Zealand, that's a total population of just 30 odd million people, right? And then we are seeing some amazing trends, which shouldn't come as a surprise, with live sports going across the world after the world opened up, if you may say so. That's have a major impact on the platforms, where you're seeing more viewers coming onto that. But then there is another point of that as well, that as more and more CTV, OTT vendors are growing, they're fighting for that viewer piece as well, because now we have more content than ever that we can imagine, and everything has to, the pie is only so big in our regions.
But I
right?
wonder if ultimately, you know, it does end up, yes, obviously there'll be new entrants who pop up with, you know, specialist services, but ultimately the larger share of the pie is going to go to the likes of Seven, the likes of TVNZ, plus of course Netflix and Disney Plus and Discovery Plus. And you know, those are, one might assume, to be the platforms that get the greatest amount of viewership.
And that is exactly what we're seeing on our pipes as well, purely because of the years of habits as well, right? Like if I am a great Seven viewer and my parents have been a Seven viewer, where that be on linear feeds, that doesn't change. I like the content. Same thing for TVNZ out in New Zealand. If I have been watching some of those content for years, nobody asks the question whether when we come to the household, are we watching this today on a linear TV, or are we going to go into a digital TV, right? TV is TV. And that is where we need to concentrate as an industry as well, that the habits and the consumers may shift from digital pipes to linear pipes to digital pipes, but the viewer base still is attracted by the content and the experience that they get while getting that content delivered to them, right? So,
and are we seeing any differences emerging between, well, I guess, two sets of pay platforms? First of all, the kind of, you know, traditional pay TV service where you pay a monthly subscription for basic and premium channels, and they, of course, are starting to add streaming services onto their boxes. But of course, at the same time, you've got the connected TVs, which can also bring in streaming service. I just wonder if there's starting to be any differentiation appearing, or whether it's maybe just a little bit too early to find a difference there.
We need to realize that set-top boxes inherently are a costly piece of infrastructure, right? And broadcasters or big content producers would prefer going to a technology which is more consolidated, more compact. On top of that, gives way more data as well, right? So we are seeing in APAC, I think in Australia, a couple of companies have already started doing that, where you can get a one-buy-fits-all kind of a package, where you have your windows of, yes, you get your ABC, which you wanted to buy, but then you also get add-on services as well to it. So that is really happening. I'm seeing a lot of that happening in bigger countries with high population density, like in India's and your Malaysia's and your Indonesia's, where it's happening fast.
Mm-hmm. And looking at the competition, you know, we touched on some of it there. Carmen, is there enough room for everybody who currently wants to be a player in the New Zealand streaming market to keep being a player in the New Zealand streaming market?
Look, I think there's a lot of content being consumed, and a lot of audience appetite for that. Is there a limit? Yes, we've got 5 million people, so there's obviously a size to it, but what we've looked at a significant amount of research looking at the number of services that people are consuming, and it's sort of between 3, 4 and 5 services that people tend to have in their repertoire.
The old
and
service stacking, isn't it? I think, which go on right now.
Yeah, and in much the same way that people have consumed multiple channels in the past. And we're really focused on having a unique offer in that market, and it does have a clear strength here. So, a real focus on our news, sports, local programming, and bringing those important events to people in New Zealand.
Your advertising supported, which
Yes.
maybe, you know, as issues with the economy start to bite, there are going to be a few people making decisions and thinking, oh, I don't know if I can afford that subscription service. You know, I'd rather like to watch some TVNZ. I don't have to pay for that. Well, pay for it in the shopping basket, but you know what I mean.
Yes, definitely. And look, you know, whenever the economy, you know, does shift, there's obviously those impacts if people are really, you know, watching what they spend. But you know, regardless, there's it's really about having the content that people want to come and consume. And I think if you have got that, then you're going to have a strong place in that market. And you know, with our advertising, we've actually, you know, taken an ad light approach where already where we have a different ad load on our streaming service, and you know, and we see the and the premium nature that we can offer through that service. So I think it's really important to be able to differentiate, and you know, that's going to be the key for every player in this market. I think globally we're seeing lots of, you know, we'll see a lot of consolidation, you know, and as the economics of the streaming services, like, you know, really are challenged around the total market. We can see that in global players trying to look at other revenue streams as well.
Yes, was Disney going down the ad route? Netflix haven't exactly said that they are, but they didn't say that they wouldn't at some point. So definitely a never say never. Well, is it a similar story for you in Australia? Obviously, a slightly bigger television market with a population 25 million or thereabouts. But I guess ultimately the same issues are at play.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, we see subscriptions fatigue, very similar to New Zealand in terms of each household has multiple subscriptions, and I guess it's one of access, and you kind of touched on it, is that at the end of the day, something like 7 Plus is a free streaming service, ad supported. So the you know, the barrier to engage is very low to actually access the service and content, but it's also about that unique content as a you know, local broadcaster, you know, as touched on, you know, news, sports, you know, local drama. You know, these are the things that the local broadcasters bring to the table versus the kind of US based.
And I guess when you think about it, they're kind of things which always drew people to the channels, be they you know, in the linear days through to streaming. People ultimately, if it's good quality, they like something which is familiar to them.
Yeah, and you know, we have 7 News, which is the #1 kind of news provider in Australia. So having such a strong brand associated with our streaming service, you know, when there is kind of you know, events going on, you know, we see that kind of engagement increase on the platform. But we also have, you know, not only do we look to the global sporting events, whether it's the Commonwealth Games that we've got coming up on the platform, you know, we've just done the Winter Games, but, you know, there's things that you can have, like, for example, you know, we have AFLW, so the Women's League of Australian football. And, you know, we have a replay channel that is 24/7 that, you know, gets engagement all the time. So there's just different things you can kind of tap with having that streaming service, and the way you can scale and engage the audience.
How do you then look to expand in future years? Is going overseas, either to New Zealand or further afield, and selling, and I realise rights issues sometimes get in the way, but selling some kind of international version of 7 to, you know, I can imagine parts of the UK might enjoy that, and elsewhere seeing something from back home.
I mean, you know, we're obviously content is king, and we're already a producer of formats and content that is kind of, I guess, like ITV in the UK, where you do those licensing kind of deals. But certainly our focus is Australia, because it's kind of like so much kind of growth potential just within kind of Australia, but certainly from, you know, content formats and rights and selling them overseas will obviously continue.
Yeah. I wonder if you could also maybe look at the formats and where people are watching. Presumably, you want people to watch 7, be it on a connected TV, a mobile, a tablet device with maybe ever so slightly different versions according to where people are viewing.
Yeah, look, it's really important in terms of platform reach and device extensibility. You know, as an example, we launched on PlayStation 5 quite close to the launch, because we actually know there's actually a demographic that use that device, you know, young male audience, that we might not be able to tap on some of the other devices. So.
And that remains a popular platform, being on there. I'm always, I guess, because I'm not in the demographic, I don't really think about it, but a means for a particular segment to be associated with the channel, which wouldn't otherwise be.
Yeah, you know, when we do, you know, we have kind of strong content that resonates on that platform. So whether it's been the Olympics or something like V8 supercars that we have here, or, you know, our latest edition of SAS Australia. So, you know, that's the sort of content that we see pop on those devices. But I think it's, you know, it's incredibly important to be everywhere, and CTV is a huge growth. And we've seen the shift, you know, devices like, you know, Apple TV, Android TV, Samsung, you know, these are all high growth platforms within Australia. So, you know, having a unified code base, you know, a consistent high class experience across those devices has been, you know, a real focus for our investment across that. But, you know, CTV is important, but you can also be sometimes surprised, and that's why you've got to treat all platforms equally, in my view. For example, during the Summer Games, we had a massive lift off on web. And, you know, effectively, consumers were in lockdown, working from home, just having the streams going in the background, you know, while they're working away. So I don't think you can discount kind of web or mobile. To us, they're also hugely important as well. And we've seen growth across those areas as well. So yeah, but certainly currently one thing we're looking at, we're not currently on Xbox. So that's kind of going to be coming up in the roadmap.
Carmen, as maybe, you know, with a slightly smaller market, is it cost effective for you to go on as many platforms maybe as Will does, or as many platforms as you'd actually like to do?
Look, you know, in an ideal world, we could be on every platform. But, you know, we've really, over the last 3 years, significantly increased the number of endpoints we're on. So we, like Seven, launched with PS5, and we're across Xbox as well as the major TV, Panasonic, Samsung, Sony, etc. So the coverage is really important, and what the key is to be where our audiences want to be. And you know, that connected TV experience is huge for long form content and the experience of it. But people have different reasons and occasions for being on other devices. And so, you know, when we look at sport, we see a lot of sport on web, and depending on the time of day, because people are sitting, you know, are sitting at work, perhaps with a screensaver on, watching the America's Cup when we were showing that, or I mean, I actually even remember being in a restaurant in Melbourne when the last royal wedding was on and looking around, and there were so many people sitting at their tables with someone streaming on their mobile phone with that event playing. And so, it's really opened up the opportunities for our audiences to engage and fit it into their lives. And I think that's really important. And it's the cost of doing business is, we have to make sure that we support those devices and have a consistent experience.
What about visibility? I have just noticed on my desk, I have a Amazon Fire TV remote. It's probably not going to show up too well here. But I'm looking here. I've got buttons for Prime Video, Netflix, Disney Plus, and Amazon Music. Not a public broadcaster in sight. And the same problem would no doubt be if I was to just to switch it on here and actually, for whatever market you're in, is sort of trying to get the prominence so that you can see your service.
Yeah, and look, that's they can obviously do global deals. I was going to say, have you not got a red button there? That's a big shift for the remotes in the UK. I think the importance really is that we work with services to make sure that we have that prominence, but also that we are a really strong service that meets our audience needs. So there's an audience demand for the service, and they can tailor make their interface that they want their apps shown on. And so it's really important that we're top of mind. And that we have the content they want so that they will keep coming back, and making sure that they pin us and put us in that area of prominence as well.
Arjun, I'd like to come to you in a moment and ask about some of the information that we know about consumers and can find from the various services. But just a quick reminder, if anyone watching does have any questions that they'd like to put to our panel this morning, we've got about just under 20 minutes left to get them in. I'll do my best to ask them on your behalf. But Arjun, sort of what we know about consumers, and the information that we can now gather from connected TVs and other devices, assuming that the consumers agree to it in the first place. What do we know? And is there, I wonder if there's even bits of information that we know, which actually we realise we don't need this now because we've got this instead.
I think where both Will and Carmen touched on the point where content is king, right? And that is truth. At NPOW, we extend that statement a bit more and we call it content is king, but experience is queen as well, right? So if you have a great content, but it's not delivered correctly, you don't know the health of your own platform, you don't understand if it is an issue with the CDN, ISP, buffer ratio, etc., and without diving too much into those words, you got to understand how is that content being delivered to the end user, right? Like just a few nuggets of information from last year as compared to this year, and specifically in the Pacific region, like our completion rate is amongst the highest in the world. What does that mean? To the end user probably means nothing, but to us at 7 and TVNZ, it means a lot that now you're seeing that the user is on average 1.2 hours more than the peers and the other region, right?
So completion rate, is that watching a show from start to finish?
Correct.
Without wandering off? Yeah.
So, and then things like join rate, like our join rate from 2021 to 2022, we are seeing in the Pacific region that it's come down by about 21%, right? That translates to that my exits before video starts have dropped down to about 25%. Very key pieces of information for the team sitting behind the desk, right? Like,
so do we know what the broadcasters are doing in order to get that data improved?
So exactly. So what you want to understand is that where can I, instead of going too intuitive and understanding there could be a problem here, let me fix this, to I know there is a problem here, let us definitely fix this and we will see the results by this much. That's way better. I think you will see more and more where they be OTT vendors, where they be broadcasters, publishers, premium players in the market. It is going to become more data-driven decision-making. And that's not just going to be confined to a team of data scientists or data analysts within. It's going to be for the marketing. Those questions may vary across where should I put the thumbnail and what thumbnail and that attracts more, and how long does it take for the user to come in and discover the content they want to discover, and how does that translate? Are the engagement metrics, content metrics, audience metrics, etc., how are they placing up for me? For a customer service team, you may want to know when Julian is calling and saying, hey, I wanted to watch the show yesterday, but it wasn't streaming well. I think it was an issue at your end. I want to go and check in the feed that, hang on, where exactly was that issue? And is that something that the publisher could have done better, or that is something that is just simply as an ISP at Julian's end that wasn't performing well? So those little tweaks, if I may say, it could be error detection even, right? Like it's something is happening at 3 o'clock in the morning where the whole team is sleeping, but you want to know that, hey, there's something actually going wrong here, because the content that we want to show about this winter sport or this live game happening across on the other end of the world is not delivering well. That is where NPAW suite of product comes in and gives that the experience data sets, if I may say so.
Right. And Carmen, I think you use NPAW for some services. Presumably, you can then use the kind of data that NPAW is able to provide to, I don't know, surface a particular show, a particular series to, I don't know, are you able to divide? I know there's only 5 million in New Zealand as a whole, but are you still able to divide it up enough in order to come up with some pretty good market segments?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the way that we can look at that, at all of our data and bring it together now is unlike what we've been able to do in the past. So we can start to get a 360 view of the experience that our audience is having, from how's the site performing, how did it perform for them, what was the buffer, were there any challenges with the play of the content or the ad, what was the advertising experience like, through to how long did it take them to find the content, did they complete it, what kind of content. So that real 360 view is really important for us to understand. But, just picking up on your point, Arjun, the really core part of it is making sure that experience just works. Something that my team are probably sick of me saying, but we can do beautiful, sexy features, and they're the really exciting things to talk about. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't work when you turn it on. It's got to be like just flicking the switch and the light goes on. And it's incredibly complex service to deliver. So, the amount of work and data that goes into driving that is really important. The other way we can use that data is actually helping individual users. And if people have got a problem, we can dive into that data and try and understand it and see it and help them troubleshoot and get back on the service.
Because I guess, you want the customer's journey to get to their content to be as simple as possible. You don't really need them to have 17 button pushes in order to get to their favorite show. Sure,
yeah. And it is really important, and one of our guiding design principles is to really get out of the way of the viewer and let them get to the content, to stand aside. And so there's a lot of talk around that kind of one click to get it, but it's actually, that's great if it's really, but it's about making it really clear pathways and a really simple solution across some quite complex decision making for people. We know that it's a real challenge across the industry.
Will, from the Seven West perspective, you must also have challenges really sometimes. I know you mentioned it was PlayStation, wasn't it? And are you able to get the sort of same look and feel between, say, something which is on PlayStation compared to, I don't know, Samsung, for the sake of argument?
Yeah, look, in terms of the different devices, if you take Apple TV as an example, there is kind of standard templates that you can use. And that's when your experience kind of becomes same as everything else on that device. But our approach to it is, having that kind of unified experience. So whatever device you're interacting with the service, it's that common look and feel and kind of best in class experience. But I think it's more than that. And, we touched on kind of, data segments and those types of things. I think where that becomes especially important is for kind of hyper personalization. So, if everyone's getting the same screen on those different devices, what you want is that obviously that target content targeted to that user. And I think, that is something you can do on platform and provide that tailored experience to that individual. But that, using kind of ML AI, it's also important to target them off platform as well. So whether you're, engaging the consumer via push notifications or via EDMs, you want them tailored based on those kind of user behavior, the kind of demographic segments. So you kind of then can highly target them, but also with the advertising experience as well.
Segues us quite neatly, really, I guess, to the topic of advertising, in particular, ad insertion, personalized advertising. Do you feel, Will, that you can play a little bit more and give both the consumer and, of course, the advertisers a bit of a better deal because of the capabilities of the digital platforms?
Absolutely, 100%. The ability, and we've been focused on a kind of a market first here in Australia with some of the what we call 7 Interactive, and being able to provide those interactive ads within the CTV environment, and we have specifically targeted CTV and that kind of ecosystem. But the level of experience and interactivity is just another level, which you obviously can't do on traditional linear.
Can you maybe give us a quick example of something which you've done with an advertiser?
Yeah, look, it can be something as simple as someone like Mini being able to pick different colors of the car within an interactive ad. But as we also know from the pandemic and that, QR codes, everyone's used to doing QR codes. So it's also much easier to tie up the transaction now with QR codes on the screen and tying that up with the individual second screen as well. So the levels of kind of transaction based from the advert to actual marketplace now is much more stronger connected.
Mm. I was watching, I think I found myself on the shopping channel completely accidentally, and I realized that the product they were promoting, and presumably every other product they decided not to hang around, had a QR code attached to it, where presumably had I have scanned it, I could have purchased goodness knows what to play with later on. Carmen, are you also looking at targeted advertising?
Yeah, definitely. And, we work really closely with our advertisers to experiment and use both data, but also just the digital experience to explore different ad formats and options and ways to engage their customers and potential customers. So, yep, like Will mentioned, and the connected TV is a great space for this, of looking at interactivity and allowing people to explore more within that advert. We also have launched dynamic ad insertion here. So within the simulcast stream, being able to dynamically insert ads and not just have whatever came out on the linear stream as well, so that we can really tailor that experience. I think a really interesting space is around contextual as well, because we talk a lot about personalization, but actually setting the context for when the right creative is shown. And so for some you know, for some advertisers, they will have a different creative if they know that it's raining in a certain region, you know, versus the weather being, you know, quite sunny or different in a different region, because it's a different message that they want to land there. So that's been quite fun, and we've, you know, worked with our advertisers and let them have a lot of creative fun with making the most of those formats.
I have to ask: are you able to charge them more for the privilege of doing this, or is it of attention device for advertisers, just that use other means of attention devices for the consumer?
To be honest, I'm not in sales. I actually don't know the answer to that.
So I didn't mean to do that to you.
But I would say that, you know, we invest a lot in helping create premium experiences that really engage our viewers, and, you know, I'm sure that the you know, our place in market reflects that.
Yeah, yeah. Arjun, I guess the kind of data which is coming through now, the type of analytics that you can do on the consumer is actually, you know, really helping these services that Carmen and Will have been describing.
It is, and I think we are seeing same thing coming from not just this region but across the globe, right? Like, where earlier just giving an example for us, NPOS Suite used to comprise of your video analytics, which is your content engagement, those kind of metrics. Then we had a module for ads and users, so ads being exactly seeing how the user experiences during that advertising session, because it's still a stream, it still has got buffer issues, still join time issues, still everything. And then you have users, which is your every platform wants to know how my subscriber is doing, which ones are at the risk of churning, which ones are at the risk of, these are the ones that I can bombard with more advertising and are more commercially effective, versus these are, let them be the way they are because I want them there, and they can move on after the series ends. So we had an offering which we have now extended. When I say extended, we have added more modules. So rather than having various other platforms and then having a correlation engine on top of it, we are trying to be that, okay, let's be one source of truth for the company, and then that makes it happen, whether that be along your CDNs, your application analytics, whether that be your benchmarking across your peers in the region, etc.
We've got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to do the old let's look ahead kind of question. Now, it's still Wednesday for me, so I know at least we can look ahead till tomorrow, but perhaps we could go 18 months maybe in the future. What's the big thing that we're going to look for on the horizon? Will, I'll start with you.
Certainly, I think for us, it probably falls into a couple of camps. The first one is, and we've started to kind of experiment in this space already, is fast channels, so the free ad-supported TV. You know, we've obviously do pretty well. And I think what this kind of confirms is that, you know, curated linear channels still have their place, and still, you know, there's a huge opportunity in terms of growth in that space. And then I'd say the other one for us is just really that hybrid model between kind of like subscription versus AVOD, and kind of the various tiers that you can have there. And that's certainly something we'll be kind of experimenting with in that time.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting. I'm told I've just got a minute, so if I'm for Arjun and Carmen, very, very quick. Arjun, your sort of 18-month prediction.
Data will be the key in all decision making moving forward. As I said, experience is still, if not as important as content, fairly important in making that happen. On that, we have introduced something called NALA, which is a natural language processing tool and it's AI powered. What that is anybody in any team within the organization could just ask a simple question and the answers will be spit out. So
that sounds very cool. Carmen, quickly to end with.
Yeah, so data really important to us, and looking at what kind of products that we can build for it to help our audiences, particularly in content discovery. And we're investing really heavily in what our digital future looks like and our digital processes, and being able to, you know, look at what kind of experiences that enables us to deliver. And so, you know, that's happening definitely over the next 18 months and beyond.
Okay, well, look, thank you all very much for taking part in our first session today. I've got some great conference sessions ahead. For me in the UK, it's a little bit like the Ashes, staying up overnight. Hopefully we get a better result though this time around. Thanks all very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.